Hello everyone and welcome to Breezy Politics. Who is the American president who had the spine to tell Israel's prime minister point blank that Israel is committing a Holocaust? We're gonna get to that story in a moment, but first, I have a moral dilemma, and I need your take. I've been involved in a small effort working on an analysis paper that examines how societies react when their own state commits an atrocity as monstrous as the Holocaust. Do they enable it, do they try to stop it, or do they simply look away? To explore this topic, I chose to compare between two cases: how German society reacted during the Nazi Holocaust, and how the Israeli society reacted to the Gaza Holocaust. By the end of the paper, I ended up with a dilemma that never crossed my mind before. Therefore, I am very intrigued to see what you think about it. But first, let me lay out the context for you. When I first began reading about the Nazi era and how German society reacted to the Nazi Holocaust, I noticed something very interesting. Even after years of relentless Nazi propaganda orchestrated by the infamous Joseph Goebbels, aimed at dehumanizing entire groups of people, Slavs, Jews, Romani, and others, by pretty much blaming them for all of Germany's struggles. But still, when whispers began spreading that a Holocaust might be taking place, some resistance still emerged from different parts of the society. The White Rose movement, the German Catholic Peace movement, the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler, just to name a few. But what stood out to me the most was how the Nazi leadership perceived the society's stance on this issue. If you visit the US Holocaust Memorial Museum website, you will see how far the Nazis went to deceive their own German society. Take this for example. You will find, and I quote, "Positive stories were fabricated as part of the planned deception." The Nazis were printing booklets telling the Germans that, and I quote, "In occupied Poland, German authorities had put Jews to work, built clean hospitals, set up soup kitchens for Jews, and provided them with newspapers and vocational training." I won't bore you with more details, you can look it up yourself, but the point is, it all comes down to this. The Nazi leadership knew that even after years of relentless anti-Slavic, anti-Jewish, and anti-Romani propaganda, their own society would not accept and would not tolerate genocide as an official policy. And that says a lot. Now, compare the attitude of German society towards the Nazi Holocaust with how Israeli society reacted to Israel's Holocaust in Gaza. On January 26, 2024, the International Court of Justice ruled that Israel is plausibly committing genocide in Gaza.
Genocide.
And this is how Israeli society responded.
Tourists and school children are going on field trips in Israel, but not to museums, instead to watch the destruction of Gaza, known as Genocide Tourism internationally.
So we were a mile and a half or so from 300,000 people who were being forcibly starved to death by the Israelis.
That was Matthew Ho, a former U.S. State Department official and U.S. Marine veteran, who recently took this tour in Sderot, where visitors use coin-operated binoculars to peek into Gaza.
An Israeli school field trip showed up, and these children, they're teenagers, they came from 2 hours away to come and watch the genocide.
The tours are also done in English for international visitors and are included in Birthright Israel trips for Jewish Americans and for all Israeli school children.
The population sees it as entertainment, where you have this complete dismissal of the Palestinians as human beings, but as part of their school curriculum.
The historical irony of what we just witnessed is absolutely staggering. Think about it. While many survivors of the Nazi genocide were marching and protesting all around the world against Israel's genocide in Gaza, the descendants of other survivors in Israel were so proud they're committing a genocide of their own, they made it part of the curriculum. They load their children into buses, take them to a hill besides the Gaza concentration camp, hand them the most high-tech binoculars to ensure they get a clear, crisp, high-definition view of other children inside the camp being starved, shot, burned alive, and orphaned. And I've noticed that for some people in the West, it's always hard to recognize an atrocity when Israel is the one committing it. So for those people, let me put it in terms you'd understand. Just think about it like you're watching a footage showing that when Germans under the Nazi rule started hearing whispers that the genocide is taking place, they didn't try to stop it, they didn't deny it, they didn't question it, they didn't even look away. But instead, they were like, wait, what? We're committing a genocide? Huh. We should take our kids to watch it and enjoy it. Now, how does that sound? Because if it sounds horrible, if it sounds sick, if it sounds disgusting, that's because it is, at least for a normal society, but not according to the Israeli society. And that says a lot. And the fact that you will never dream of seeing these stories on CNN or Fox News or New York Times or the Washington Post also speaks volumes. Because let's be real, if this was happening in another country, we'd have Oscar-winning movies and endless panel discussions about how a society could sink this low. And it doesn't end there. After Israeli kids come home from school, have their supper, and settling for the evening, their families take them on organized night boat trips around Gaza while it's being bombarded. This time, however, is not about watching children being killed. That's reserved for school trips. This time, it's about staking their claim.
While Gaza is relentlessly being erased, they took a boat with the first families, ready to occupy the land of those who are being killed and starved to death.
המטרה של גרעיני ההתיישבות להתקרב ככל האפשר לעזה, לראות את עזה כולה ולהבין שמעתה והלאה עזה תהיה כולה יהודית.
While entire families in Gaza are being wiped out, exterminated, Israeli families cruise along the coastline, circling the Gaza concentration camp, gazing at the destruction with excitement, not as mourners, not as bystanders, but as future landowners. They're explicitly mapping out the lands and homes of the Palestinian people while being wiped out in real time, staking their claim before the bodies are even cold. Just a few days ago, I came across a clip of one of America's most prominent Jews, Professor Finkelstein, a descendant of Holocaust survivors, making this very point. He brought it up in a discussion with Glenn Greenwald, one of my favorite journalists who is also Jewish. Take a look.
If you read the explosion of sheer racial derangement in Israeli society, the glee, the joy, the euphoria they have carried on with in the extermination of the people of Gaza, just the postings on their social media, it's a genuine sight to behold. And I am not sure whether it hasn't reached or plumbed a depth well beyond Nazi Germany, even in the years of war. You have to remember, as I'm sure you know, formally, at any rate, the Nazi genocide was kept out of public view. But this is a totally different thing in Israel. This is every night on the evening talk shows. The social media is saturated with soldiers boasting in glee about the crimes they're committing in Gaza. So this country is so completely unhinged.
You should watch this full interview. It's just two beautiful, peace-loving, principled, non-Zionist Jews discussing the depth to which Zionism is sinking. However, what I want to say to Professor Finkelstein is, if you think Israelis finding so much joy and glee in the death and destruction of other innocent people is as low as a society can go, hold on. It gets worse. Because after Israel's medieval blockade on Gaza has led to starving many Palestinian children to death, the world community pressured Israel to stop blocking the humanitarian aid from entering Gaza. Consequently, the Israeli government, led by war criminals, caved in to the pressure and partially lifted the blockade, allowing some trucks through. However, the moment the Israeli society heard that food trucks were on their way to reach the starving Palestinian children, they rushed with their kids. They will never understand why they teach their kids to do these things, but that's a topic for another day. So they rushed to physically block the life-saving aid trucks from reaching the starving Palestinian children.
They're images that have enraged and horrified Jewish settlers throwing aid destined for Gaza to the ground. This was not a one-off. For months, videos have emerged showing aid convoys for Gaza being blocked or vandalized by settlers and Israeli activists in attacks condemned by the White House.
It is a total outrage that there are people who are attacking and looting these convoys coming from Jordan, going to Gaza to deliver humanitarian assistance.
They put their bodies between the life-saving foods and the starving Palestinian children, deliberately ensuring that more Palestinian children would starve to death that night.
They're starving to death.
You know what? If they're starving to death, no a single loaf of bread should go there.
And if you were wondering why would anybody do such a horrible thing, it's because what they want, the reason they've been killing Palestinians since 1948 is... I'm gonna let them speak for themselves.
These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel. But what of the Palestinians who live in Gaza now?
I just think we need to kill them, every one of them, and that's it. And if not that, because the country will not let that happen, the government. Just, at least, the least we can do is just kick them.
You heard that right. They don't hide their intentions anymore. Professor Finkelstein is absolutely correct. Israel is a lunatic state representing an unhinged society. A society just like this girl are disappointed that the Israeli government hasn't managed to exterminate all the 7 million Palestinians.
We need to kill them, every one of them, and that's it.
Living on their land in Palestine. Now, is it just me, or is this the same Nazi ideology we've been taught to hate and despise? So why is Nazism tolerated when it's practiced by Israel? Why is it excused and not called out when it's called for by Israelis? What am I missing here? And for those who's gonna say, nah man, this is just the fringe opinion and it does not represent the Israeli society as a whole, I really wish you were right. I really do. But you're absolutely wrong. And here's why. When the whole world was marching and protesting the Holocaust in Gaza, Tel Aviv University conducted a poll asking the Israeli society if they thought the Israeli government was doing too much killing in Gaza. They euphemistically described it as too much firepower. So if Israel was using too much firepower in Gaza. And here's what they found. Almost 60% of Israelis believed that the military was using too little firepower. Not enough killing. 36.6% believed the level of killing was appropriate. And only 1.8% thought it was too much killing. Imagine, 99% of the Israeli society thinks that the collective punishment, the genocide, the killing and maiming of hundreds of thousands of innocent people, most of whom are women and children, was either not enough or appropriate. And that leads me to my moral dilemma. Which is not about comparing how Germany and Israeli societies reacted to the genocides of their states, because at this point, there is no comparison to be drawn. That question has already been answered. What I've been wrestling with, however, is something more disturbing and more unsettling. And that is, on a purely moral level, who is more evil? Who embodies the darkest and the purest form of evil? Is it the Israeli political and military machine, the one on trial for genocide? Or is it the Israeli society that didn't just cheer from the sidelines, didn't just found joy and excitement and entertainment in watching the worst crime possible against humanity? Genocide. But went out of its way to find practical means to physically participate in the extermination of the innocent occupied Palestinian people. I'm really interested in your take on this. I'll be reading through the comment section to see what you think about this dilemma. And before I wrap up, let's answer the opening question. The American president who told Israel's prime minister that Israel is committing a Holocaust was President Ronald Reagan, 41 years before October 7, 2023. On the morning of August 12, 1982, President Reagan received intelligence that the Israeli army in Lebanon was once again doing what it does best, killing women and children. Without hesitation, the president picked up the phone and called the Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, demanding an immediate halt to the massacre. And then in no uncertain terms, he said, "Menachem, this is a Holocaust." Later on, President Reagan wrote in his diaries that he used the word Holocaust deliberately, accurately describing what was happening. He reflected that the defining image of that Israeli massacre in Lebanon would be a 7-month-old baby with its arm blown off. This story is for those who think history began on October 7th. Thank you for watching.